Hello there, David Taylor on Mr Pelargonium, back with another video for the Pelargonium and Geranium Society. Having just filmed the previous video, I'm now doing another one about some hybridising that I'm getting on with this year. What I'm actually trying to do this year, I've done a lot of Regal breeding in recent years, but what I'm actually trying to do now, I'm actually working with a plant called Orset. Now, Orset is basically a really overgrown sort of scented variety that was bred by a lady called Edna Popplewell. She used the species Quercifolium, which is a sort of large, sort of almost oak-shaped leaf species, and she crossed Quercifolium with some Regals. I'm crossing Regals with Orset to maybe take it a step further to try and almost get Regal type blooms on a sort of large growing scented leaf type plant. Trying to just basically take it a little bit further. It's always experimental, but this is half the fun of doing it. So that's what I'm actually doing this year. Orset is my basis, and I'm adding Regal pollen to the Orset stigmas. I want the Orset to be the seed parent because I almost want a little bit more Orset than I do Regal, so that's why I'm doing it that way round. And I'll just show you some of the some examples of the cross pollination that I'm doing. Right, okay, now this Orset has been blooming for 3 to 4 weeks, and I've been using the pollen from large flowered Regals on the stigmas of these plants as they more or less emerge, or as the stigmas begin to open anyway. I'll close in and I'll show you. I've got a few fresh stigmas opening up anyway, and I'll show you what I'm doing. I've also got plenty of beaks forming, so lots of mating has been going on, and I've got lots of seeds beginning to form. That's the idea. Now at this time of year, it should be said that I keep my doors and windows netted up, primarily to preserve my flowering show plants, but also to stop any bees or insects coming in to potentially cross-pollinate with other plants. So because I want this purely to be Regals doing this cross-pollination. So I'm just going to close in and show you what I'm doing. Right, now one of the first things that I do is find Regal blooms with a lot of pollen on. And one that has been very good for me actually this spring has been my own Gosbrook Night Sky, which is a pretty very large blooming plant. We can see there is tons and tons of pollen on there. So we're going to pick some of those off. I'll have to put the camera back on the stand to actually pull those off. But I thought I'd show you that there is masses of pollen on these blooms. It's fresh, it's open, it's ripe, it's ideal. And I'll show you now, whereas there is another one. This plant has got a lot of pollen as well. Look at the pollen on those blooms, although the only thing that concerns me minorly with that is that that's a relatively small flowering Regal. Right, so here is my Gosbrook Night Sky, I call it that. Very dark bloom, very dark plum, with little spots and splashes of white, very much like the night sky. Well, I think it is anyway, so that's why I've named it that. So all I do, just pull back the leaves, the petals rather, not the leaves, to reveal the pollen head. Lots of pollen blocks on there. Ideal they are for cross-pollinating, full of pollen, nice and fresh. It's relatively early in the morning. And what I'm going to do now is close right in and focus down onto the open stigma of a new bloom that's just emerged. Now, potentially, I'm just trying to think whether, see here, sometimes you get them when they're closed up. The stigma is closed at the end, and that means they're not ready and they're not open yet. But here is one, a fresh bloom that's just fully opened. Got the 5 little prongs, one for each seed pod, potential seed pod that could get germinated. And all I do is basically ram the pollen onto the filament end. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. Hopefully I've got this in focus. I think I have. And it's basically rubbing pollen all over that. You'll see all the pollen powder dropping all around the base of the petals there of the bloom. And there it is. Just knock it on. I usually get a couple. I'm going to just go off and get another one. I've dusted all of the pollen off of that particular bloom. So I'm going to just find another one. And there we are. We'll have another go. Fresh pollen again, all bouncing down. We can see the pollen is going everywhere. And this is exactly, I just ram it in. I mean, some people get brushes and brush off there, but I don't do that. I do a little bit harder. There's plenty on there, plenty of pollen gone onto that stigma. Now you can see here close up now, there's a beak that's forming, there's another beak that's forming. These were ones that I'd done earlier. These were done, these were one of the first heads that was, so that was done probably 2 to 3 weeks ago, so they're forming. There'll probably be about another few weeks. There's the biggest one actually next to it, that one there. But they're all forming, so they're going to produce seed. Again, you may question why, but I know there is regal genetics in this plant. Because as I've said right at the beginning, Edna Popperwell crossed some regals with quercifolium, which is a species plant. It has leaves relatively similar to this, but they're a little bit softer and a little bit more rounded like an oak leaf. I will actually just, if I can, show you Fair Ellen, which is more of a quercifolium hybrid. This though has clearly got some regal in it, and I'm wanting to take this just a little bit further to get some slightly larger, perhaps more colourful blooms on this plant. Well, this one here, you can see that stigma is not open yet. So that you've got to wait for the stigma to open. They ripen just marginally, usually after a couple of days of the bloom opening, then you'll get that open fan of the filaments of the stigma. But this one, these aren't ready yet. Those ones I've done because I can see the pollen around it, but that one's fresh open, but it's not ready for taking pollen. The actual action of being able to do this probably only lasts a couple of days at the most. The filament will be open, and you know, you've got to have right pollen to cross-pollinate. Other people have asked about cross-pollination. I mean, these are cultivars, so in order to get seeds, you've got to be cross-pollinating with a different variety. Now, I have been asked by some people that if they've only sort of got like one variety and several of one variety, why they're not getting seed. Well, the reason is you've got to have different varieties. You've got to have a cross-pollination. You've got to have a different variety to be able to produce the seed pods. Right, so there we are. I thought I'd just show you a little bit of my hybridising for this year, slightly different. If you're not subscribed, perhaps think about clicking that subscribe button and put your notifications on to see when I release new videos. They're fairly regular at this time of year. But in the meantime, look after yourselves. I hope you're not having to use too much water to keep your plants going if you're in the UK at the moment anyway. And I'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye for now.